That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Night House, a Fox property that premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival and is being released theatrically August 20th, 2021.
The director?
David Bruckner, technically his second feature after 2017's The Ritual, which I did see, but I don't remember terribly too much about details here and there. I probably remember more. He's contributed to segments to a variety of other omnibus films like The Signal in 2007, VHS, Southbound, etc.
You really liked this film.
I did really like this
I wasn't able to see it because guests weren't allowed.
Of, COVID restrictions that apply differently to different
That's okay with me.
rooms.
Just I do what I'm told. But I'm going to provide a short synopsis, as I'm wont to do.
Uh-huh.
Okay, the story revolves around a lady named
Beth, played by Rebecca Hall.
Okay, Beth is grieving the loss of her husband, who killed himself a week prior.
Owen, yeah.
Played by?
Evan Jonigkeit.
Okay. So Beth and her husband lived in this house on a lake, and she is starting to see visions when she starts searching through her husband's stuff and finds out that he was kind of into culty things, and also he built a house.
The occult.
Across the lake, like a replica of the house they lived in across the lake. Okay. The reason he did that was because his wife was being stalked by a demon. And the reason she was being stalked by a demon is that when she was younger, she was involved in a car accident and died for 4 minutes, but was revived, obviously. And this demon is mad that it couldn't get her when it had the chance. But since it can't get to her now, it's been whispering into the husband's ear. In order to protect his wife, because he didn't want to harm her, he built this replica of their house to sort of trick the demon, but he was also being influenced to kill the wife, which manifested in him seeking out women who look like his wife and doing weird sexual things with them and killing them. So in this replica house, there are a bunch of women who look like his wife dead, buried, but that was him trying to avoid hurting his own wife, but ultimately it drove him to kill himself. So now the wife is sort of discovering all of this, and now the demon's in her ear trying to get her to kill herself. So the final scene of the film is her on the lake in this alternate universe that this demon occupies, being tempted to kill herself when she decides not to. Mm-hmm. The end.
That's kind of.
When you described it in greater detail, I thought it sounded really good. Not necessarily scary, but I thought it seemed like a really good story.
It is written by Ben Collins and Luke Piotrowski, and this is the team that's with Bruckner making the new Hellraiser.
I didn't know there's a new Hellraiser.
Yeah.
We reviewed Hellraiser 1 and Hellraiser 2.
For the Blu-ray, yeah.
Yeah.
But that'll be next
I did
year.
enjoy those movies.
Anyhow, yes, and I think, so, side note, if you are looking for this solely to be a supernatural thriller, you might be disappointed because I think it's doing so much more than that, which is what I really liked about it. And Rebecca Hall gives a fantastic lead performance.
What do I know her from?
Oh God, The Gift with Joel Edgerton and Jason Bateman.
I'm assuming she's generic looking because they found a bunch of actors who look like her, right?
I don't think she's generic looking.
I don't know who this is, but
Vicky Christina Barcelona.
Let me look her up. Hold on. You continue. Rebecca Hall, you say? Okay.
Anyhow, and also a side note, at this year's 2021 Sundance Film Festival, her directorial debut, Passing, which is based on a 1920s novel by Harlem writer Nella Larson, I thought was absolutely fantastic. I cannot believe that it left that festival empty-handed without any kind of awards. That was at the level of that should have played at Cannes in the competition, in my mind. Anyhow, so Rebecca Hall, who I think has... Oh, you know what she's really good in? Christine, directed by Antonio Campos, where she plays the reporter, that Floridian reporter that shot herself in the 70s on...
Okay. I'm not familiar. I don't recognize her, but...
Oh, you've seen her in things. Anyhow, she this is one. It's kind of like Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary. I think the emotional depth that is instilled is kind of rare for what you would classify as a genre film. Again, if you are looking for answers to the supernatural situations that it imposes upon this, you might be disappointed. And I did, it left me wanting more. I wanted them to delve more into this architecture of Owen's and like tricking a demon basically by building a kind of a backwards formulated house. I think the editing by David Marks and the cinematography by Elisha are also pretty impressive, because we're getting all kinds of sequences, especially as the narrative picks up, of if you're positioned a certain way in the house, you can kind of see the outlines, the changing outlines of demons. But what I think it does, because this has stayed with me a couple days after seeing it, is how it really works as an excellent metaphor. And kind of operating on the same wavelength something like The Skeleton Key, if you remember that.
No.
You don't remember that movie? With Kate Hudson? What I do remember from that is she's a non-believer, and basically she gets wrapped up in this supernatural world because she's finally convinced that it exists. So
well, you didn't explain that in this story, the husband seems to believe more in like the afterlife.
Yes.
Whereas the wife doesn't, because she died for 4 minutes and didn't go anywhere.
Right. So we learn. So we see her grieving. We see her watching her old wedding tapes, getting drunk on brandy in this beautiful lakeshore house. She has a very sensitive neighbor named Mel, played by Vondie Curtis-Hall, who I think has a handful of very well-placed sequences, and a best friend at school because she's a teacher, a colleague named Claire, played by Sarah Goldberg. And we learn little bits through conversations. We believe, seriously, she's just drunk and seeing things and she's going through this trauma. But she goes out for drinks one night with 3 other co-workers, and she reveals that she's carrying around this very cryptic suicide note that has some telling things to say. And
like what?
Basically that you're right, there is nothing, nothing was following you, you're safe now. I think that's what it said now. And she reveals, I died when I was... To her friend after reading the suicide note alone. Like, she died when she was a teenager, blah, blah, blah. She saw that there's nothing. She describes it as just a tunnel. There's no light at the end. So she's
that why you said that you thought this movie reminded you of me?
Yeah. I think you'd relate to her character. Anyhow, she also makes an interesting statement to these friends, like, I'm the depressed one. I had no idea he was depressed. It was such a shock to me. Maybe I infected him. And her friend's like, well, that's not how it works. But as we come to find, there are lots of there are audio jump scares in a way that some people I could see not liking or reacting well to, but that I think come at certain transitions that work on an emotional level, because you're drawn into like the tide of her emotions, and then all of a sudden there's this terrible crash of music in this house. I think it's called the Calvary Cross that keeps playing from her wedding, which is kind of eerie. But what I think it works as a metaphor is because how we gravitate towards lightness or darkness, whether you interpret that as the occult or any various religions that I believe are also kind of like cults, and how you are susceptible and vulnerable to starting to believe things. So I do believe that her husband was a killer, and there are maybe potentially supernatural things that manifested upon him. But I think what is interesting is how this works with Rebecca Hall's Beth, is that she was a non-believer and she has taken on the guilt and trauma of her husband's demons. So it's a film really about how you can't take on someone else's demons, metaphorically, if you will. Again, I think that if you want this to be one thing specifically, you'll be disappointed. But it's something that I really would like to see again and kind of further discuss and tease out everything that it's doing on a different level.
Well, you do that. What would you give the film?
I would give it 4 out of 5.
Wow.
I mean, as far as like women in madness films and being stuck alone in cabins, and even how many times have we seen something where like, oh, there's this alternate, the what do they call it in Stranger Things, or
the Upside Down?
The Upside Down, or in Insidious where it's the further. Like, we're well accustomed to these other worlds being there, but I really enjoyed seeing it as with this emotional component of maybe we all have these problems and issues that are only really blown open when we're faced with certain traumas, when we're near to death, and how we interpret those things, and of course always kind of being suspicious of the narrator, of whose perspective we're seeing in the story, because I don't know that I actually believe that there really is anything supernatural going on, which I think that makes it even a more compelling conversation. But whatever the fact of that is, I think Rebecca Hall is really good. Yeah.
All done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Bye.
Bye.